continue our series, telling our mission story. The first week we talked about who we are, children of God, greatly loved, capable of great love. Last week we talked about why we're here. What is our purpose? We talked about being shiny, salty Christians. Do you remember that? We talked about shining God's love into the world, sharing God's love with other people. And we also talked about being salt, bringing out the true flavor of others, helping them to grow into God's call, who they're called to be true to who they are. And this week and next week, we're going to talk about how we do that. How do we accomplish our purpose? And today, particularly, we're going to talk about the role of relationships. So we're going to talk about relationships, mostly in terms of new relationships. So here in this community, there are lots of well-formed old relationships. A number of you all graduated from Quakertown Community High School. Some of you, a number of you from the same class, and you all know each other through that. A number of you have grown up in this area and know each other just from proximity, know each other's families, and some of you are even related by blood, right? Watch who you talk about at St. John's. Might be somebody else's relative. But ultimately, anybody who walks through the door is welcome here, is a child of God. And so we're going to focus on that aspect of building relationships, building new relationships, new people. So we're going to look at this through the lens of a very famous story from a movie from the 90s known as Toy Story. How many are familiar with Toy Story? A number of you. Yeah, very popular. So there's a friendship that develops in the first story, the first Toy Story, between two of the characters. Do you know who those two characters are? Buzz and Woody. That's right, Buzz Lightyear and Woody. And they're both toys, right? Just so we have that clear. Okay. So we're going to watch a little clip of when Buzz and Woody first meet each other. So let's watch that clip. It's a couple minutes long.
Star Command, come in, Star Command. Star Command, come in. Do you read me? Why don't they answer? My ship! Blast. This will take weeks to repair. Buzz Lightyear mission log starting 4072. My ship is run off course en route to Sector 12. I've crash landed on a strange planet. The impact must have woken me from hypers. Terrain seems a bit unstable. No readout yet if the air is breathable. And there seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere.
Hello? Whoa. Did I frighten you? Didn't mean to. Sorry. Howdy. My name is Woody, and this is Andy's room. That's all I wanted to say. And also, there has been a bit of a mix-up. This is my spot. See, the bed here.
Local law enforcement. That's what time you got here. I'm Buzz Lightyear, Space Ranger, Universe Protection Unit. My ship has crash landed here by mistake.
Yes, it is a mistake, because you see, the bed here is my spot.
I repair my turbo boosters. Do you still use fossil fuels, or have you discovered crystallic fusion?
Well, let's see. We got double A's.
Watch yourself. Who goes there?
Don't you? Okay, friends.
Do you know these life forms?
Yes. They're Andy's toys.
All right, everyone, you're clear to come up. I am Buzz Lightyear. I come in peace.
Oh, I'm so glad you're not a dinosaur.
Thank you. Now, thank you all for your kind welcome.
Say, what's that button do?
I'll show you.
Buzz Lightyear to the rescue. Hey, Woody's got something like that. He has a full strength only it sounds like a car ran over it.
Oh, yeah, not like this one. This is a quality sound system. Probably all copper wiring, huh? So, where are you from? Singapore? Hong Kong?
Oh, no. Actually, I'm stationed up in the Gamma Quadrant of Sector 4 as a member of the elite Universe Protection Unit of the Space Ranger Corps. I protect the galaxy from the threat of invasion from the evil Emperor Zurg, sworn enemy of the Galactic Alliance.
All right. So how does this relationship initially develop? So you saw their first encounter. For those of you who know the movie, what happens? They become best pals right away? No. There's some friction, right? Between Buzz and Woody? Absolutely. So Woody's jealous, right? Because Buzz has seemed to supplant him as favorite toy. And he's trying to bring Buzz down a notch throughout most of the beginning of the movie. And prove to Buzz that he's not actually a space ranger, just a toy, right? There's that famous scene where Buzz goes to infinity and beyond and he flies all around the room. And Woody is saying that, no, you weren't flying, you're just falling with style, right? So the conflict escalates between these two until eventually it leads to them getting lost, away from home, at a play place. And they're found again by another kid, whose name is Sid, right? Yeah, Sid. Sid lives next door, and he is known for, he's bad, you're right, April, he's bad. He's known for mistreating the toys that he has. Pulls their heads off, that's usually, doesn't treat them very well. So Woody and Buzz are in trouble, right? And they have to get out of Sid's house. And to get out of Sid's house, they have to work together. And so this scene right here is the next scene we're going to watch, is a scene where they kind of, their relationship develops, let's put it that way. So let's watch this next scene again, a couple minutes long. We're at Sid's house. There's Sid.
Hey, Buzz! Hey, get over here and see if you can get this toolbox off me. Come on, Buzz, I can't do this without you. I need your help.
I can't help. I can't help anyone.
Well, sure you can, Buzz. You can get me out of here, and then I'll get that rocket off you, and we'll make a break for Andy's house. Whoa,
Sid's house. What's the difference?
Oh, Buzz, you've had a big fall. You must not be thinking clearly.
No, Woody. For the first time, I am thinking clearly. You were right all along. I'm not a space ranger. I'm just a toy, a stupid, little, insignificant toy.
Whoa, hey, wait a minute. Being a toy is a lot better than being a space ranger.
Yeah, right.
No, it is. Look, over in that house is a kid who thinks you are the greatest, and it's not because you're a space ranger, pal. It's because you're a toy. You are his toy.
But why would Andy want me?
Why would Andy want you? Look at you! You're a Buzz Lightyear! Any other toy would give up his moving parts just to be you. You've got wings, you glow in the dark, you talk. Your helmet does that whoosh thing. You are a cool toy. As a matter of fact, you're too cool. I mean, what chance does a toy like me have against a Buzz Lightyear action figure? All I can do is... Why would Andy ever want to play with me when he's got you? I'm the one that should be strapped to that rocket. Listen, Buzz, forget about me. You should get out of here while you can. Buzz, what are you doing? I thought you...
Come on, Sheriff. There's a kid over the house who needs us. Now let's get you out of this thing.
Yes, sir.
So how does their relationship develop? What happens to ease the tension? Yeah, right. He asked for help. What did asking for help involve?
Telling him how he felt.
Telling him how he felt, right? And being honest about his insecurities. Being vulnerable. In fact, they both are vulnerable in this conversation with one another, right? Buzz admits that he's just a toy. He's not a space ranger. And Woody admits that he's been jealous of Buzz because Buzz is a cooler toy, a cooler, newer toy. And yet ultimately, they come to this recognition of this common tie that they have. What's the common tie? Andy, yeah, their kid. I don't think they call him Winona, I think they call him their kid. Andy is their kid, and Andy loves both of them, and Andy needs both of them. And so their love for Andy is what brings them together. And ultimately, of course, they get out of Sid's house, they get back to Andy. This story, I want you to think about how it's similar to our gospel story. The story about the Samaritan woman and Jesus. Jesus and the Samaritan woman have a tense relationship initially because of circumstances, right? She's a Samaritan, he's a Jew. And we know that these two ethnic groups in Jesus' time did not get along. They had a similar backstory, and they both worshiped God, but their history had led to their people parting ways. And they have some different religious traditions that distinguish them as well. And so there's a kind of competitiveness, friction between these two groups. And yet, in their interaction, there's this vulnerability. Jesus admits he needs water. He's thirsty, right? And he's out of his element. He's not in his hometown. And so he needs help to get the water. And yet the Samaritan woman, too, is vulnerable in this conversation. She is a woman on her own. And in the course of their talking, he uncovers some tension in her family history, right? About their husbands. And as their conversation continues and deepens, they begin to see the common ties as well, just like Woody and Buzz here. They are both children of God, even though they come from these different backgrounds. And ultimately, their love and worship for God ties them together. And they both believe in the Messiah. And Jesus revealing himself as the Messiah, as the Christ, even further deepens their interaction. So, what's the secret? What's the formula for building new relationships? What do we see? Think about how you met your best friend. Initially, you didn't know each other, right? And you encountered each other somehow, somewhere. Right? That's all that looked. Somehow, somewhere you encountered each other. Maybe it was here at St. John's, but probably somewhere else. And you encountered one another and you interacted with one another, right? And maybe initially there was some fear or apprehension or misunderstanding, even jealousy. I don't know. My best friend, I met her through another friend. And the other friend who I met her through was intimidated by her. And so initially, so was I. But then, as you get to know the person, whether it's through conversation or shared activity, you begin to see what ties you together. The things that you have in common. For my best friend and me, it was books. We read a lot of the same books growing up. And these stories, these characters that we loved, tied us together. And of course, over time, other things tied us together as well. But this is how relationships develop. And here at St. John's, we do these things. We encounter people when we go out into the community, right? And we offer opportunities for folks to have conversation, like our fellowship time after worship. We also engage in activities of service, like volunteering at the food pantry or collecting for the food pantry. And we develop these relationships with one another, right? We develop these relationships because relationships are ultimately about discovery. Discovering who we are and who this other person is. And as those relationships deepen, we discover more and more what differentiates us and what ties us together. And as we discover what differentiates us, we can help each other to discern our calling, our particular calling for who we are. And as we discern what connects us, we grow deeper in that love that God has for us, in that identity that we share. that cross on our forehead. So this is one of the ways we do ministry. We accomplish our goal here is by building relationships, strengthening relationships that we've had for years, and building new relationships with others who perhaps, like Buzz Lightyear, stumble into our space, or who, like the Samaritan woman and Jesus, we meet out in our daily life. And we invite them back to hear the story, to get to know us better, to join us in our work. So let us give thanks to God for these relationships, for these possibilities, for these opportunities to grow.